I get messages that say the only good Muslim is a dead Muslim. I get threats on my life. On the people that I love. And I try not to talk about it. Because the function of racism, as Toni Morrison said, is distraction. My focus has always been on making this a city that's affordable, on making this a city that every New Yorker sees themselves in. And it takes a toll, because this is a city that every single person deserves to be in. It's a city that we all belong to. And the thing that's made me proudest in this campaign is that the strength of our movement is built on our ability to have built something across Jewish and Muslim New Yorkers, across New Yorkers of all faiths, and all backgrounds, and all boroughs. And anti-Semitism is such a real issue in the city. And it has been hard to see it weaponized by candidates who do not seem to have any sincere interest in tackling it, but rather in using it as a pretext to make political points. And that's what I've tried to share.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, his own crowd is coming for him. Zohran Mamdani, New York City's mayor, is reportedly blocking Trump's deportation push and putting illegal immigrants ahead of the citizens he swore to protect. The coalition he bragged about building, quote, across all faiths, all boroughs, it's fracturing fast. He went on camera, broke down about death threats, about messages saying, the only good Muslim is a dead Muslim. But New Yorkers can't afford rent, can't walk safe in their own city. He's playing victim while his city crumbles. And what drops on Mamdani next? Federal heat, and he is not ready.
I can also say this, that you spent so many legendary years in City Hall. And I want to ask you a question here, Rudy.
Sure.
I know you're a proud Catholic. What was your reaction to seeing Ramadan at City Hall, right? To seeing Muslim prayers inside of your office, your old office? What was your reaction to seeing
it was
everyone barefoot and sitting on carpets?
Yeah, nothing short of traumatic. If people came into City Hall and did that, I'd have them all thrown out. First of all, I read the Quran often. I started reading it when I was 19 and did a paper on it when I was when I wanted to be a priest, qualified for the seminary. And so, here's one copy. Here's another copy. This copy gives you the 5 different translations that they use for words often. This copy gives you how they rearranged it so that it looks like all the bad things Muhammad said first and all the good things he said last, and the last cancels the beginning. The reality is, it's not ordered like the Bible or any book that you would ever write. It's not ordered in chronological order. The Holy Quran, question marks, exclamation points and quotation marks. The Holy Quran is ordered in the length of the surah. That's the chapter first. The first surah is short. It's the prayer, the universal prayer they say every day. The second surah is probably one of the 2 or 3 last things that he wrote. It talks about not being friends with Christians and Jews. It talks about killing them. It talks about killing them in war, where you don't have a chance to torture them. He also makes reference to, and then his interpreters flesh out in what they call hadith, that Allah would prefer if you tortured them. But if you can just kill them, you still get feted in paradise. And the whole 72 versions comes out of a passage in the Quran talking about how if you die killing the enemy are defined as Christians, Jews, and non-believing Arabs, you will go to the best part of paradise, where you will have wine endlessly. Now, remember, they don't drink, right? They don't drink.
Unless you're Ilhan Omar and you own a winery, but yeah.
Yeah, you'll have wine, right? And you'll have all the sensual indulgence that you want. That then leads to a follow-up hadith that talks about versions available. The only debate here is how many. Some say a large number is meant by the word. Some say 72, some say 79. Now, this is not a religion.
Okay, Zohran Mamdani just got booed by his own constituents, and it's not hard to see why. Quick breakdown for the people who haven't been following this closely. Zohran Mamdani, New York City mayoral candidate, Democratic Socialist, DSA member. This is Comrade Zohran, the guy who turned City Hall into a Ramadan prayer venue and has been running around New York promising to fix a racial wealth gap so enormous, he calls it a crisis. He built a 45-agency racial equity framework. He's out here with the Reverend stories and the displacement statistics and the public comment periods. He is fully in champion of the people mode. Here's why this matters to every single taxpayer in that city. His own lawyers quietly gutted his flagship equity plan before it ever went public. The DOJ is already looking at it. And the wealth gap he keeps describing as a crisis, his party created it. Democrats have been running New York City for over 30 years. That gap didn't happen despite them. It happened because of them. And now he wants more power to fix it. That's the story. That's the whole thing. Now, before we get to the numbers, I want to start with something that got a lot of attention this week. Rudy Giuliani. Someone sat across from him and asked what it was like to see Ramadan prayers held inside City Hall. Inside the building he used to run every single day.
Now, in this report, what we've seen, it's a report that is both coupled with a true cost of living report, is that the inequities in this city, the racial inequities, are stark. We are talking about findings that have shown that the wealth of a median white household in this city is more than $200,000, while that of a black household is less than $20,000. This is not an indictment of any one New Yorker. It is an indictment, however, of policies and politics that have persisted for far too long. Our commitment now is to act upon these findings, to do so in concert with New Yorkers' comments, as we've now opened a public comment period for the next 30 days to ensure that we have a city where we are reckoning with the long history of racism here and starting to act upon a framework that puts equity right at the center of it.
Okay, Rudy just reached into his bag and pulled out two copies of the Quran. He's holding them up on camera, one in each hand, flipping through the pages, explaining the differences. One edition has 5 translations side by side. The other, he says, rearranges the chapters so the difficult passages come first and the gentle ones come last, and the last cancels the first. Rudy Giuliani read this book at 19 years old to qualify for the seminary, and apparently he never stopped. You can agree or disagree with his read of the text. I'm not telling you what to think. What I will say is, the man studied it. He described what he found, and for doing exactly that, every major outlet is going to call him every name in the book by tomorrow morning. You know how this works? Ladies and gentlemen, here's what actually matters for this story. Mamdani did not hold Ramadan in a park, or a cultural center, or a rented hall. He held it in City Hall, the building that belongs to every New Yorker, every faith, every background. That was a deliberate political choice. Rudy, as the man who ran that exact building, called it traumatic. You can disagree with that reaction, but you cannot pretend the question it raises doesn't exist, because it does. Now here's the pitch. The reason Mamdani says he deserves to be the next mayor of New York City. The numbers he keeps putting on the table.
Now, the racial equity plan for which we are currently taking public comment, it will only further this work that is already underway. It will put the goals of 45 city agencies under one racial equity framework, allowing us to better focus our efforts against a crisis. Now, we know that all of New York City is facing the crisis of cost. We also know that that crisis is not born evenly. From 2000 to 2020, more than 200,000 black New Yorkers were pushed out of this city because they could not afford living in the most expensive city in the United States of America. I remember running into a reverend, and I was asking him where he was going. His church was in Harlem. He said he was heading to the airport. I said, "Where are you headed?" He said, "I'm going to South Carolina because that's where a lot of my parish lives now. They live there because they can't afford to live here any longer." We can't allow that to be the case in this place that we love.
Median white household in New York City, over $200,000 in wealth. Median black household, under $20,000. Not a gap, it's a canyon. And if those numbers are accurate, that is genuinely alarming. I'm not dismissing them. But I want you guys to sit with me on this for a second. Democrats have run New York City since 1994. Over 30 years of Democratic mayors, Democratic councils, Democratic housing policy, Democratic education budgets, Democratic rent control frameworks. 30 years. And the wealth ratio is 10 to 1. Ladies and gentlemen, when Mamdani calls this an indictment of policies, he is right. He is absolutely right. He's just describing his own party's record. He is standing in the building his political lineage controlled for 3 consecutive decades, pointing at a crisis they oversaw and presenting himself as the cavalry. That is a level of political nerve I almost respect on a technical level. Almost. And he goes further. It's not just a wealth gap. He's talking about actual displacement. Yeah, I stumbled on it. Displacement. 200,000 black New Yorkers pushed out of this city over 20 years.
Some of the conversations we had earlier for those created boards by the city that are paid for taxpayer dollars to look at homelessness that we've seen, reparations, yet nothing seems to come out of these things, but money keeps going out. So following that announcement, DOJ Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, was right on top of it, Councilwoman. She says this, based on Mamdani's proposal, sounds fishy / illegal, will review. The DOJ already looking into this racial equity plan. Councilwoman, your thoughts?
Well, how equitable can this plan be when the mayor's own law department insisted that all references to DEI be scrubbed from the plan because they were concerned it would open a door to a legal challenge from the Trump administration?
The Reverend story. Man is heading to the airport, South Carolina bound, because that's where his entire congregation lives now. They couldn't afford Harlem. They couldn't afford New York City. And that is a real story about real people who got priced out of a place they built their lives in. I'm not laughing at that. But here's what you guys need to sit with. Who was governing New York City the entire time those 200,000 people were leaving? Democrats. His party. His political lineage. 30 years of progressive leadership with a promise to protect working families. And somehow the congregation still ended up in South Carolina. And now Zoran shows up with the Reverend story. At election time, with the microphone and the framework and the press conference, saying, we can't allow this to happen. We? You weren't stopping it when it was happening. Your people were in the room the entire time it was unfolding. Here's the thing about, wait, I said I wasn't using that phrase. Let me rephrase. Here's the pattern with Democrats and black communities. They use the story. They photograph the pain, they quote the Reverend, and then the Reverend's congregation is still in South Carolina. Nothing moves. The story gets recycled 4 years later under a new candidate's name, every single time. And his equity plan, the centerpiece, the thing he says will actually fix this, just ran into a very specific wall.
But let's not confuse wanting to work with being forced to work because the Trump administration is taking a sledgehammer to Social Security. Instead of hanging those workers out to dry, we should be expanding and protecting Social Security, especially when tariffs and war are now driving up prices for our seniors, for everybody in this country. So, Mr. Adcock, how could we pay for bigger Social Security benefits?
Our preferred solution would be making the wealthy pay their fair share.
Yeah, that seems right to me. Look, we've got to make sure that the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share and not force seniors to work until they drop dead. Right now, a billionaire, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, pays as much in Social Security taxes as someone who makes $175,000 a year. I've got a bill to fix that, and it would raise enough money to increase benefits by $200 a month for every senior and help stabilize Social Security to make sure it is around for the long haul.
Ladies and gentlemen, his own law department told him to remove every reference to DEI from his DEI plan. From a racial equity document, his lawyers scrubbed the equity language out of the equity framework because they were scared the Trump DOJ would legally dismantle it. Let me think through this out loud, because the more you look at it, the more it unravels completely. Mamdani builds a 45-agency racial equity framework. Every city department, all pointed in the same direction. Public comment periods, press releases, the full production. And then his legal team sits down, reads it, and says, we cannot publicly say what this plan is actually trying to do, because if we say it out loud, we lose in court. So they stripped it. They removed the description of the thing they're trying to do in order to protect the thing they're trying to do. She's cooked. The plan is cooked. A policy that can't be defended in its own language by its own authors isn't a policy. It's a press release. And it is taxpayer money going into a framework that the people who built it won't stand behind under legal scrutiny. I'm not going to claim I know exactly what the DOJ does next with this, but when your own legal team blinks first, that is not a minor drafting issue. That's the plan admitting it cannot hold up in the open air. Quick shift now. Different person, same ideology, same playbook, different face. But this one hits your grandparents' Social Security check directly. Okay, so Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates pay the same in Social Security taxes as someone earning $175,000 a year. Is that true? Yeah, it's actually true. The Social Security wage cap is a real policy. I know that. I'm not going to pretend that's not a legitimate structural problem worth discussing. But watch what's happening here. This is the same party that ran trillion-dollar deficits, inflated the price of everything your grandparents pick up at the grocery store, and blocked every serious entitlement reform for 20 years because they wanted the issue alive at election time more than they wanted a solution on the books. Now they're the ones saving Social Security. Now they care. Will they actually follow through on a bill to raise the wage cap? Probably not. Should they fix it? Maybe. And I'll be honest, I'm going to contradict myself here because I do that sometimes. I don't actually believe Trump's administration has a perfect long-term record on protecting those benefits either. I genuinely don't know. I'll say that plainly. But make the wealthy pay their fair share has been the Democratic Party's bumper sticker since before most of our grandparents were born. It goes nowhere. It's designed to go nowhere. It's political furniture. Sounds like something, does nothing, and everyone's forgotten it 6 months later when they need a different line. Ladies and gentlemen, Zohran Mamdani got booed by his own people, and the reason isn't complicated. The distance between the speech and the outcome has gotten too wide to ignore. His own lawyers gutted his own plan. His party built the crisis he's running against. I want to believe New York is finally done accepting the story as a substitute for results. Hell no, I don't. I've watched that city do the exact same thing every 4 years and nothing changes. But that black-pilled part of me keeps losing the argument to the other part. The part that looks at that crowd and thinks, God, what it would mean if they were actually done. Thank you all very much for watching. Goodbye.